You are listening to Spotlight Sessions with Justin Bamforth. The program provides an inside look at the creative field through exclusive conversations with industry professionals. Every episode is recorded live each month in the Adobe Creative Career Discord. Check out the show links to learn more and join for free. This episode was previously recorded before a live listening audience. Timothy Schmidt is not only an incredible designer, but an incredible thinker and doer. And he started off earning his degree in digital design from the Art Institutes of York, Pennsylvania, and has gone on to work for some incredible companies since then. You see, Tim was the senior UX designer at PayPal, and then he later became the director of product experience design at Mastercard, and is now leading the entire design operations at Mastercard. He's based in New York City with his wife and 2 kids, but originally from Baltimore. And Tim is a huge fan of heavy metal, hockey, and video games, and can commonly be found under his alter ego pseudonym, iHeartRendering. So without further ado, my friend, the spotlight is now on you. Welcome back.
That was quite the intro. That was awesome. Thank you, Justin.
Hey, thank you for joining us again. You had a lot of wisdom and tons of knowledge and wealth in the industry that you're sharing with us last time. And I got awesome feedback from you from that first session. So here you are doing an encore presentation. And we're going to focus tonight on UX design, because I know that's something that a lot of you ask out there, especially those who are maybe new to the design industry or just graduated college, or maybe you're in college right now getting ready for the next semester. But how does one get into UX design?
Nice. So I would argue that anyone working in a design role or is pursuing a design career, regardless of what that media type is, right? Be it print design, motion graphics, any of that, UI design, all of that has some kind of user experience associated with it. So when thinking of how the work, the materials that you're putting out, how are those consumed? If you're working on a piece that's specific for print, where is it going to be displayed? What are the other things that are kind of around that? What's the format? What's the type of inks that are being used? All of that then plays into the effect or the experience that the end user in that scenario is going to have to be able to actually kind of take in what they've got, and then what it is that they're going to retain from that. I would even argue, apparently I'm doing a lot of arguing. I've already used that twice. I'll come up with better analogies as I go. But I would argue that even folks that are more in engineering roles and product roles are even making experience-based decisions. Because at the end of the day, any decision that's made that has an impact on either the end product that's being put out, the materials that are being delivered, or how an end user or consumer interacts or kind of takes in that information, like there's an experience there. So almost any decision is able to be tied back to an experience. With that said, I view, before like talking about how to actually get into the role of user experience, I think it's important to identify like what do we typically mean when we're talking about that? And when I'm thinking of user experience design, it really is the combination of many other disciplines. Because there's UI design, there's visuals associated with it, there's content design. Content is massive when it comes to experience. And like I said, engineering, front-end development, back-end development, all of that feeds into the user experience. Now, a good UX designer is able to kind of identify what is the actual problem that we're solving. And it's important to always frame things out as problems because especially when thinking from an experience standpoint, we're more likely to gain traction on what it is that we're working on if it's addressing a specific problem or a potential unmet that the customer may have. So with that, as folks are as you're identifying that problem and getting into it, that's where really you're able to start thinking through more of the, okay, if I do A, B, then does C happen or does X happen? Kind of taking that step back and looking at things more holistically and not just as a specific screen or as a specific moment in an experience, but kind of like the entirety across that end-to-end journey. So that's a very long-winded way of saying, I would argue, again, that most folks are already doing something experience related. But when we're talking about actually getting your foot into a user experience role, it's taking that step back, being able to look at, okay, how did this decision impact what happens next? And how did what happened before it influence this decision? And the this and that I'm talking about could be specific moments in a journey that a user's going through.
A lot of graphic designers kind of feel the pressure to maybe make that jump to the UX space because they see that in job postings, right? A lot of times these companies are asking for this blend of graphic design and UX design. And sometimes the companies don't even know exactly what the difference is, right? They're just throwing it out there because it sounds like a buzzword. And I know a lot of graphic designers are getting caught up in it because it seems like there's more money involved with a UX design role. But let me ask you this: what are the main differences between a traditional graphic designer position and a UX designer position?
That is a great, great question. So to me, when I think about it, it is the ability to live on with a product or with a project. When I'm thinking of more of a like a traditional graphic design type project, I'm thinking way back to early days of my career, there was always like a big delivery that happened, and that's phenomenal. You got to get to that delivery date, right? You want to hit whatever your timelines are, et cetera. But once that delivery happens and it's kind of out there and in the wild, there's not too much more that you can really do with it. You can measure, hey, did we increase the particular metric or number that we were looking for once we put it out there? But once you've put it out there, it's kind of for better or worse, it's kind of done. Where when we're thinking user experience, there's this ever moving or like kind of evolution of the product that you're working on and supporting because there's always opportunities for improvement for it. It's that it allows you and kind of gives you that ability to put something out there into the world, monitor it, see how it's doing, but then continually work in the background on, okay, I think if we made this particular piece, if we can get it down from 4 steps to 3, that could improve our conversion, or we may see less drop off at a particular point. Or, hey, it looks like we're losing a lot of people at this particular moment in a flow or in an experience. Maybe we need to provide more clarity. So let's test some different messages that we're putting out there. And with, I think any good user experience should be able to be tracked and measured so that you can seek out where are those opportunities? Where are those areas for improvements that could be put out there? It doesn't necessarily immediately tell you what those improvements are. That's where we as designers come into play to say, okay, let's think creatively about how could we improve whatever that particular metric is that we're looking at in a way that makes sense within our design system, makes sense with our product, and makes sense basically to the customers that we've already got.
Is it safe to say that UX is more data driven design?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of data that should be available to you and is very, very usable because, especially if we're working for a company where there's, again, I'll keep saying metrics and numbers, but anything that I'm saying, if it doesn't make sense to someone, just throw it into the chat and I'll do my best to clarify those. But with any experience, like you're really looking at how's it performing? What can we continue to do with it? How can we improve where it's lacking? Or, hey, if we improve something new or add something new to it, maybe it's a whole new piece to the experience. What does that do? Does that make our numbers go up? Does it make it go down? And those numbers, again, is dependent upon what it is that you want to measure, or what it is that you're trying to track with it. And that data is just incredibly valuable because a lot of what we do as designers, those that are not in design roles could very much look at it and interpret it as opinion. Okay, well, they think that this looks the best. They think that this is the right way to go. And it's difficult to argue with opinion because everybody's got their own preference. Everyone's got their own take on things. But you can't argue with data. if you put something out there and it's working and you're seeing numbers go up in the way that you want to see them go up, or maybe you were trying to make them go down and now they're going down, you cannot argue with that data because it just shows what is actually happening. And then the more and more that you're able to lean into that data and be able to look at that data, or interpret it in different ways, the stronger and more valuable you'll become, not only like in your own craft and your skill set, but to the company or the organization that you're working with or working for.
How important is psychology to UX design?
Excellent question. It's important in the sense that you should understand how people think and that not everyone thinks the same way. Not everybody needs the same things. Not everybody interprets information or takes in information in the same way. So understanding all of that is huge. The other big aspect is the context. So the context in which your product or service that you're building and creating actually exists within. That context, the context and the understanding that not everybody is the same and that the people that you're designing for, may not even be the same as you. Looking into all of that and understanding what they're doing, kind of what they're going through, it helps you be able to put yourself into their shoes. So I don't necessarily think that as a designer you need to have like a full-fledged background in psychology, but understanding, hey, this is how people think, this is how different people interpret things, these are considerations that maybe we should make, and being able to kind of get in the head of who your actual users or customers are, and ultimately be able to distill that down into some form of a persona. And we talk about personas a lot when it comes to user experience design or product design because it's our anchor. It's what we're always able to tie back to. And anything that we're creating, let's say we create a persona, we want to talk through who is this person, some basic background or demographic type information. What are some things that they think and feel or do? What are some of their current pain points? What are things that are unmet needs? What are the goals they're trying to get to by using whatever product or service that they're using? Or what is it that they're trying to build up to? Understanding all of that and being able to articulate that in a way that your partners will understand is so powerful. And when you've gotten to a point where you've actually got your partners or your stakeholders referring back to your personas, you'll know that you've been like making incredible strides, that you're heading down the right path there. And that's kind of made like a whole loop around there on that site off of a psychology question. But being able to understand who you're creating for is everything.
Yeah, let me circle back to the whole personas thing because those in the audience may not be familiar with this term, user personas. What are they, and how do you come up with them?
So there's a couple of different schools of thought. I'm of the mindset that it's better to have something to start with than to go in with a blank slate. So and I'll come back to why I feel that way in just a second. So a user persona is really just giving yourself a particular customer or user or human to be able to look at and refer back to. And it's very possible, and honestly a best practice, that you should have multiple personas for anything that you're creating to understand, hey, these are the different types of customers, these are the different types of consumers or people that we believe would benefit from whatever it is that we're building. And with those, you always want to make sure that you're maintaining some very basic demographic information: location, name, age, education level, any of those sorts of things. Then in addition to that, you'll want to talk about what are some things that that individual thinks about. And you want to keep it in the scope or the lens of the the product or kind of like ecosystem that you're designing within. So if we're talking about somebody that's something related to finances, some of the things we may want to understand is how do they feel about their current financial situation? How do they feel about the financial tools that they have available to them? Um, what are some challenges that they have related to those? Are there any pain points? Those pain points could be related to maybe whatever financial institution that they're working with, or it could be, you know what, I just don't get paid enough. And you want to keep it very human and very realistic in terms of what those pain points and unmet needs and like challenges that they may be experiencing are, because that'll help you then identify exactly what where your opportunities lie in helping with that experience or helping that particular person out. Now, when you're creating them, I mentioned I prefer to start with something as opposed to just a blank screen or a blank slate. And by something, I mean I'm going to take a swing and just put together a persona based off my assumptions and what I believe based on what I know from my own past experiences. That's fine to give you a starting point because I like to have a starting point and then validate. And the way that you validate is you can do that with surveys. You can send out surveys, there's research that you can do to understand if the information you've put down is correct, but also to surface things that you probably didn't even think of. But the important thing is, and again, this is my take on it. I always like to have something as a baseline to start from, because then I'm able to, like I said, validate it, evolve on it, and even if, as I'm putting this together and getting the survey data and getting responses back from however many people I was able to speak to or reach, even if my initial assumptions were wildly off base, I at least now know, hey, that's not a path to go down. So I still chalk that up as a win. The other school of thought is you start with the surveys. You start with the information. You start with the research to ask the questions and build from there. I personally struggle with that because I find having some kind of a baseline and using assumptions to at least get started help me then formulate my research. They help me formulate the questions I want to ask in the survey. And then, yeah, it just makes it that much easier to be able to map things back or validate.
Got it. And what are some of these forms of user research that you deal with?
So there's a number of different kinds that are available to us. When we're talking very early on and we're in the stage of persona creation, we typically refer to that as generative research because we're going out and we're looking to create something from it. And that generative research could be done in the form of surveys. They could be one-on-one interviews. They could be focus groups. Those are some kind of like the main paths that you could take to be able to get the learnings that you're looking for. The most important part of any of those, though, are identifying what are the specific questions you want to ask, because you don't want to go into the conversation without some questions prepped, because that will help keep you basically on script and make sure that, hey, these are the 5 things I have to get answered. I'm going to make sure I get them. That doesn't mean that you only have to focus on those 5 things, though. You should absolutely. So, like when we're talking interviews and kind of like one-on or focus groups or anything like that, where you're speaking with someone and trying to better understand them, that's where almost like I'm going to say almost like a therapist type analogy is you just want to embrace the silence, right? Let there be those long pauses. Let there be those hangs. Let the individual that you're speaking to speak up. Let them answer the questions. Because be it a survey, an interview, a focus group, the worst thing you can do is lead them down a path. Lead them down a path that either validates what it is that you're putting out there or aligns with your perfectly aligns with your assumptions. It's totally fine if the person you're talking to does align with your assumptions, but they have to come to that conclusion themselves. They have to be the ones to say that information and get you to it. You have to be able to remove yourself from the work at that point, basically, to be able to kind of have those real conversations, as well as just understand what exactly is it they need.
Yeah, because that gets into a whole nother aspect where there's bias, right? Where you're influencing these results. And we see this sometimes in the plethora of surveys we get sent to our email inboxes all the time, right? We see these loaded questions. I can always tell when a company is actually using user researchers, as opposed to just, amateur questions in these surveys,
Mhm.
because it's so important how you frame that question so that it doesn't lead the individual down a certain path, or confirm, your bias.
Totally.
As a UX designer, are you involved with the user research, or is that a separate position that's hired by these companies?
That really comes down to the size of the organization or the company that you're working with. Smaller organizations or groups, and maybe it's a large organization, but their design practice is small, right? Maybe the design team is a very small team. And when I'm saying design, I always encompass research with that, because I don't think you can have one without the other, if you're looking to actually be successful. It doesn't mean one individual, though, has to be comfortable doing all that. I think it's very important as a UX designer or a product designer that you should really understand how research works, how you can use research to your benefit, and then the difference between things like generative research versus evaluative research. As a UX or product designer, over the course of my career, I've done a lot of evaluative research myself. That's where I've created something, I've built a particular experience, um, and then I've gone and tested that with users. And again, that's a moment where it's a muscle that you have to build, to be able to kind of remove yourself from the work when you're doing that testing. Where the more generative research typically is handled by a very experienced researcher, because that is happening very early on in kind of the life cycle of what it is that you're creating. And you need to be really skilled and understand, okay, how do I have these conversations? How do I interpret the information? How do I identify themes that are coming from these conversations? To be able to then translate that into, hey, this is a type of value prop that would resonate with this particular audience. This is a type of, or let me say it differently. This is a collection of jobs that these personas we've created need to do. And we need to be able, our product needs to be able to satisfy those jobs to be done. So again, kind of like in smaller design teams, it's very likely that a few designers are playing across many roles. And then in larger organizations, so like for myself, at Mastercard, our team is split between a research arm and a product design arm. And then within those, we even have different suites of disciplines. So like on the research side, we've got experience strategy and experience research. On the more pure design side, we've got visual design, product design, and content design, that make up that arm.
Let's get into some of those main differences between visual designer and content designer and product designer. I see this with a lot of younger designers too. I'm interested in UX UI. What are these? What are the main differences that separate all of these different designer roles and titles?
UI is a portion of user experience. The user interface is what it is that you're interacting with. What you're interacting with plays a larger role in whatever the experience is that you've got a customer or user going through. So to say, hey, looking for a UX/UI role, it's not wrong. UI is just inherently a part of UX. Within the industry and across a lot of just different job descriptions, we're seeing user experience and product design or product experience design being used interchangeably. They do essentially mean the same things. I'll share that at Mastercard, one of the initiatives that I worked alongside the leadership with was creating new job families within the organization. Previously, we just had a user experience job title that was kind of the catch-all. It didn't matter if you were content, research, whatever, it was just user experience. In larger organizations and more like just bigger corporations, it's very important to have delineation between the different roles because it plays a factor in your end of year reviews. It plays a factor in your growth conversations with your managers. It's not fair to evaluate a content designer and a researcher the same way. They're both wildly important to the team. Both of them ultimately have an impact on the end experience that a customer goes through and what they receive. But the ways that they do that and the value that they bring is different. So there are differences in the different job families that are kind of out there. And if I had to say, I think there's about 6 that you could really argue, and there I am using the argument analogy again, or line, that you could argue are different facets of user experience. So we've got research, which we've talked about a little bit. We've got strategy, which is really around okay, so what do we do with this information that we've got? How do we turn this into something? We've then got visual design, which is exactly as it sounds, right? It's the visual, it's the aesthetic. How do we keep the personality, the branding, all aligned and in sync? Product experience design, which is more around, it would probably be the most similar to what folks traditionally think of or historically think of it as a UX role, where it's, okay, we're going to look at something from A to B, but we also need to cover all the small steps in between in that particular journey and what it is the user's going through. So it's using the design systems that maybe the visual designers have created to put into practice. There's another job family around content design. So the voice, the tone, the content strategy. How do we actually communicate things? What's the cadence in which things are communicated? How do we speak in an inclusive manner to make sure that no one's excluded? But how do we do it in a way that we're not excluding folks by trying to be so inclusive? How do we balance all of that? Those are all challenges and things that need to be taken into consideration. And then lastly, or maybe not lastly, but it's the 6th one that I think of, is around design operations. And that's what my current role is within Mastercard, as I head up our design operations practice. And it's all about, okay, as a design team, how do we work? How do we align to the company's way of working? How do we make sure that every designer in the organization has what it is they need to be the best version of themselves and be able to do their job the best that they can?
If I'm understanding correctly, the term product designer is your typical UX role.
Yes. Yeah, they've really become interchangeable across the industry.
Okay. Um, because I see that on job postings a lot. We're looking for a product designer. It doesn't say UX designer, it's just product designer.
Yep. And I would argue that's because the user experience, and then you may even see in some companies refer to it as the customer experience or customer experience and design. All of that ultimately is under that umbrella of user experience, with the idea being that all of these things and everything that you do essentially influences or impacts the experience your user is actually going to have.
How can someone who might have a traditional print or even web design background make that leap into this space?
Awesome question. So it was a transition that I made as well.
That's right. You did this.
Yeah, very early on in my career, I focused a lot on video and motion graphics. Um, that was kind of my mainstay and where I thought I wanted to continue and pursue. Um, but over time, I became more interested in just the man. It makes me sound so old. I got interested in the internet, um, and wanted to really focus more on that. And then just the idea, like the appeal to it for me was how quickly you can actually push something live and then actually see it working and see it out there. So that the ROI or like the instant gratification was there for me with that. Um, so when making the switch into a more experience led type of role or experience minded role, it really was in like when I was interviewing for those and having those conversations with different companies, it really was looking at, okay, what are they looking for in this particular role? And while my portfolio may not map to it one to one, because I was coming at that time, I was coming from, I had a lot of print work, I had a lot of motion graphic work, not a ton of web or UX work, but I had it in my mind. I was like, I could do that, you know. Like, okay, I can figure it out. I want to learn it.
And I remember that. So, for those of you in the audience who aren't aware of this, Tim and I, we graduated the same year, part of the same
Sure did.
class from the same school.
Yeah,
Back then, UX design wasn't even a term. There was
it wasn't.
nothing, yeah, it didn't exist. But you somehow you made that leap. You ended up working for Bill Me Later,
Yep, that's right.
yeah, which got purchased by PayPal,
Yep, that's correct.
and then you kind of like were just at the right place at the right time, and I guess your
Yeah,
career kind of transitioned into that space.
yeah. It there was a string of fortunate events that I was able to just kind of capitalize on. Um, that allowed me to be able to kind of get into the field. But it really was thinking about, look, everything that we do, if we want people to use what it is that we're building, we need to tie it back to them and what's in it for them. Um, so making that switch and like again, like when I was having those interviews and those discussions, it was just looking at, okay, what was I trying, like what emotion was I trying to evoke with the work that I had done? What was the purpose it was serving? Why was this something that I created? What was the intent behind it? And that kind of behind the scenes thinking is so incredibly important for like product design or user experience type roles, because so much of the work that we do, while the actual visuals and the building the experience itself is massive, there's still a ton of work that happens before that. All the stuff like I was saying about like we've got persona creation, we've got identifying who's the audience that we're actually going after, what's the appropriate problem space, are we asking the right questions, are we actually in the right problem space, is it well enough defined that if we put it that we could actually build a solution around it, and getting that clarity along that journey. So I was thinking back to things like, yeah, when I was putting something together for, if I was working on a motion graphics project, typically I always started with a really rough storyboard, just some sketches. It's no different than wireframes, right? It's just a different media that you're putting it out in, but it's the same concept. This is the way that I want to deliver the information. And in the case of a motion graphic piece, it's happening through timing, sequencing, syncing with audio. There's all sorts of different ways that you can kind of really get the message that you're trying to drive home to resonate. Where then when you're looking at it from a web-based experience or like a mobile-based experience in some way, it's okay, what are the moments in this experience that really matter? What are the ones that I really have to make sure we land um, in order for the user or the customer to want to continue to use our product or service? Or if you're working on something that's maybe not a daily use type thing, I've got some friends that work that work for Take Two. I've got some friends that work like in the insurance space. Those are things that you hope you don't have to go to every day. But when you do, how do you make sure that it's very clear and very easy to understand? Okay, I need to make a claim on this. Here's where I go. Here's what I do. And to be able to understand that and see that, you need to first understand what are the most common types of claims. What happens? Can you take global events into account? For that, thinking of during my time at PayPal, one of my favorite projects that I worked on was with the PayPal Giving Fund, which was their nonprofit organization and part of the company. And we had built a kind of like whole disaster relief platform where in a matter of minutes we could identify reputable charitable organizations that were responding to natural disasters around the globe. And literally within minutes, we could spin up a page, a link, get it blasted out across any of the social medias, make it available for anyone to be able to get that, and then allow folks to be able to donate and contribute. That's something where it's like, hey, I hope we don't have to do it often. But that was something where not only from an experience standpoint were we designing it for, let's say you, Justin, making a donation, we were also designing it for, okay, the internal team and the people that are launching it, how do we make that setup process as easy as possible so we don't waste a second and it can get out there? And I think that's the other piece too of the user experience kind of role set and or like product design role that folks don't often think about is a lot of times there's two sides to it. There's the externally facing part, but then there's also the internally facing part. And that could be, again, some different UI. It could be some kind of an administrative space. The experience could be as simple as, hey, how do we make sure leadership understands what this product does? How do we make sure they understand it in a very simple way and can see the value in it so that we want to continue to invest in it and keep building that up?
To those of you who are just tuning in now, we are speaking with Timothy Schmidt. He is the Director of Design Operations at Mastercard. And let me ask you this, Tim. You know, we hear a lot about these online courses, like I think Google has a UX certification program, right? Um, do those certificate programs make a difference if you're looking to hire a UX designer?
For folks early on in their career, it does. To be able to see that and understand it and just see kind of like that motivation and drive there is wonderful. And let me say it differently. It's certainly not bad, right? It's only advantageous to be able to show that.
The reason I bring that up is I had heard from someone else in the UX field that the problem with certificate programs that are created by Google, for example, they teach you how to design for Google platforms. They're not teaching you like the whole breadth of UX design principles. They're just, trying to basically create the ideal Google designer. Is that true? I mean, have you seen that in some of these programs?
To an extent, because a lot of the skills and like methodologies are transposable. You can move them from one organization to another. So just because it's a something like a Google sponsored course, um, I wouldn't immediately dismiss it as, okay, well, that's just teaching me how to be the best designer at Google. Sure, it could be. That's wonderful. But I would love to have a designer that's like, yeah, I'm the best at XYZ. Sweet, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, please join my team. So that's where like showing that is, again, just definitely not a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think it's a hindrance. And I can't, if it's something that's looked down upon for any reason, my guess is that may not be an organization that really has a high value of design.
Are there specific certificate programs or online courses that you recommend, or any that you hear good things about?
Yeah, there's no shortage of them out there, right? Like
There's a lot, yeah.
there are, and they don't even all have to be like specific certifications because being able to like kind of talk the talk is a big piece of it. The certifications and the degrees help a ton with at least getting you through some of the initial screeners that happen when submitting resumes and getting those out there. But there's a number of courses off of like Udemy. I think even Masterclass has a bunch. There really is no shortage.
Let me ask you this. When you're looking at a portfolio, specifically a UX design portfolio, what do you prefer to see?
So I want to see a couple examples of what is the final product, right? What was it that was built? But that's literally just scratching the surface of it. I want to understand what was the problem you were solving? What exactly were you going after with what it was that you created? Um, who was that target audience? What were some challenges that you ran into while doing it, and how did you overcome them? Because every project's got some form of a challenge tied to it. It could be technical limitations. It could be timelines weren't long enough, so we had to cut XYZ features from it. Any of that stuff. What was the level of influence that you had on that particular project? How did you convince your partners that this was the approach we want to go? And we know that so much of design can be viewed as opinion. How did you articulate, hey, this is why this is the right path? Or this is why we should start with this, and then we'll measure and evolve from there. Those are really while the end product, a few visuals from that end product or that experience that you've built are, you can't not have those, right? Like that just is a piece of it and it has to be there. I would say if we were to rank things though, that would be lower on the scale from my perspective. And when I'm looking at resumes or looking at folks coming in for a rec for our team, as opposed to, hey, here was the specific problem. Here's how we captured it. Here's how we socialized it. Here's how I got, here's the challenge I ran into, et cetera. Being able to get that. So more of like a case study as opposed to just the, hey, here is the project itself. Here's what we built. Because knowing, one of the things that we talked about a little bit is so much of user experience or like product design, and again, those very interchangeable across the industry, those two labels. One of the things that we talked about a little bit ago was there's so much work that happens before you even get to building something and publishing it and putting it out there into the world. You don't want essentially half of the work that you've done to be invisible when you're applying for something or when you're going for a role. You want to make sure the full breadth of your involvement of what it took to actually get to that end state is present.
How necessary is programming to being a good UX designer?
Love this question. My stance on this is a knowledge of programming and understanding how code operates, how different languages work is more than enough. You need to be able to understand, okay, what are some possible technical limitations that I could run into when building this? Even if you're not necessarily the one that is building it, because that'll put you in good favor with your development partners. And then one of the other things that I've seen, and I myself have been very guilty of this over at different points in my career, where I've also done some of the coding. or building is I will design to my coding limitations. I know enough to be able to go in and understand what's happening, but I'm not going to pretend that there's things I can go in and write from scratch, right? So what I'm going to do is design to what my limitations are, because that's the way I'm going to be able to hit my deadline. And for some folks, if they're comfortable with that, that's perfect. And if there's projects that's okay with, fantastic, by all means. But understanding the constraints is more important than knowing how to execute.
Let's get into some of the software that you use, because
Sure.
I know the answer to this question, but the audience doesn't. Uh, do you use Adobe XD when creating your prototypes? And if not, why?
So I do not. I've dabbled with it. I've tested it. Part of my role as our design operations lead at Mastercard is looking at the tooling that we use and evaluating it for our specific needs within the organization. And when it comes to building out our prototypes, we went the route of Figma over XD. It just checked all the right boxes for us where XD wasn't quite there when we were going through and doing our evaluation. Now, with that said, we do still heavily rely on the Creative Suite itself. Still use plenty of Photoshop. We use a lot of Illustrator. I still use a lot of After Effects. I still find ways to flex my motion graphic and like video editing muscles on different projects within the org. And all of those are still very much used. But when we're talking about product design, like user experience, Figma is our primary tool that we've been building that out. And I know this is in Adobe chat here, but has become more of the industry standard.
Yeah, because I remember a while back you were using a Sketch.
Yep, we were.
Yeah, Sketch and InVision.
That's exactly right. Sketch and InVision, we started to run into some limitations. They were not hitting. They weren't checking all the right boxes for us in terms of what we needed and how we needed to continue to scale. And when I'm talking scale, we had a kind of a big growth moment where we went from just over, so Mastercard itself is just over 30,000 employees. Within that 30,000, we had 100 designers. Over the course of the last 4 years, we had kind of an explosion in growth where we've gone from 100 designers to, I think we're at 463 is our official number now. So there's been a lot of hiring, a lot of growth and scale, and things like Sketch and Vision just weren't delivering what it was that we needed and didn't enable us to work in the way that we needed to work. So we had to seek out other tooling, and that is, as design operations, that's part of my role, is to make sure that, hey, as designers with the Mastercard, we have access to everything that we need to be able to do our job to the fullest.
I remember when Tim was having these conversations with me. He was asking me about XD and what I thought of it. Remember that we were.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I don't make decisions when it comes to tooling or process lightly. We make sure that it is very well vetted, that all of the pros and cons are listed. We even have a specific a scoring rubric that we've created for those evaluations. Yeah, it's a very lengthy process. Let me say it differently, not lengthy. It's a very diligent process. That's a better way of saying it.
Yeah, yeah. And you were looking at every aspect of it, because I remember you were
Yep.
grilling me on some of these things, and I'm like, yeah, well, look, here's why I like it, here's why I don't like it, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I tried Adobe, people, I really did. But anyways,
Hey,
how do
we
you,
talked to some great folks from the sales team on the Adobe side, and like I said, we are still heavy Creative Cloud users as well. It's just XD was not our. It just didn't suit what we needed.
And to those of you who are just tuning in here, we are speaking with Timothy Schmidt. He is the Director of Design Operations at Mastercard. You can call him Tim. He's very approachable. He's over on LinkedIn, which I posted in the show chat. I'll post it up again so that you can connect with him over there. And for those of you listening on demand, links are posted in the show notes. And if we don't get a chance to cover your questions, please reach out to Tim directly on LinkedIn. Now, if you are new to the Adobe Creative Career Discord, I'd like to take a moment to share one of the coolest things we're working on right now, and that would be the Adobe Creative Apprenticeship Program. This program connects aspiring creative people like you with top creative companies providing the actual training and experience that you need, which also looks amazing on a resume. Think of it like the ultimate internship meets mentorship opportunity. But wait, that's not all. You see, there is another aspect to the program, and it's called commissioned projects. This is where you can get even more experience working on an actual paid project with Adobe. Yes, that's right, Adobe as your first client. Seriously. The details on the Creative Apprenticeship Program, the commissioned projects, and more incredible career resources can all be found at behance.net/resources. That's behance.net/resources. Let me ask you this, Tim, because a lot of designers struggle with this. I struggle with it. You struggle with it. How do you handle anxiety and getting nervous in moments, especially in the work that you do? Because there are a lot of stressful moments.
Yeah. So it, it's a muscle to build, 100%. I remember getting so nervous before a meeting or a presentation or meeting with a client, where I would be a mess. I'd just be shaky. My leg wouldn't stop bouncing under the table. Sweaty. Nobody needs that. Yeah, and it was difficult, and I had to kind of push myself through it and get comfortable with it. But a couple of tricks that I still use to this day are remembering that, hey, whoever you're talking to, whoever you're presenting the work to, they don't know what you're going to say next. They don't know what's coming next. So if you fumble or you make a mistake, you're the only one that really knows it. And that for me made it a lot easier to be like, okay, cool, yeah. If I slip, it's all good. They don't have to know that I slipped. I can just recover and keep moving. If we're talking about anxiety related to like the work that you're producing and what it is that you're putting out, what I tell my team is, look, just take the swing. Just take the swing, and make sure that you've got. Let me say it differently. When you take that swing, even if it's not the right path, you then are able to just know that that's not the right path. Right now, you've crossed that one off the list. Much like a brainstorming session, you've got to get the bad ideas out of the way first. And there's no shame in that, right? Not every idea that we have is gonna be a home run, to keep using that baseball analogy, with it. So yeah, just take the shot, do it, and seek feedback. Seek feedback early and often. The second you feel like you've got a question or a moment where you're like, I don't know. I don't know if this is the path we want to go down. I don't know if this is, whatever the question is that you've got, just go ahead and give it a shot. Go talk to someone, ask a peer to give it a once over. Do practice runs of how you're going to share. Write out some of the key points that you want to make sure you hit on. That way, you at least don't walk away from any discussion without hitting those points.
don't take what you do too seriously. Or I should say, you always have fun. I've seen it when other people, your colleagues, interact with you, and there's a level of respect that they have for you that I've never seen with anyone else. And yet you still maintain that personable attitude that I think is really, really cool. People feel comfortable talking with you, even though, you're wearing like the loudest shirt or the loudest tie or something that is like, you really in your face to get your attention or something that really pops. You're always a professional, but you're always a human being too. And that's what I love about you. You have this incredible personality.
Thanks, man. I've always had the mindset and tried to stay very true to myself as to who I am, because I do believe that more you can find more opportunities as an individual by just being true to who you are. And I will be the first to tell you that I do not take myself seriously whatsoever. But I am dead serious about my work. That is so yeah, there's that. That's kind of my my take on that. I just wanted to throw that out there. While I don't take myself seriously, I take my work incredibly seriously. But I do like having fun, you know? You can do it boring, but why?
As long as I can remember, you've never conformed to any corporate, image. You've always been somebody who stands outside of that, and yet you know your stuff. So it's really cool, everyone. But let's talk about some of your personality behind the scenes, because outside of Mastercard, you are a musician. You're a hockey player. Um, you have a lot of things that you're involved with. But let's tackle music first, because you have an extensive guitar collection. You're a metalhead,
I am,
right?
yes. Absolutely.
Is that the type of music that you listen to while you're at work? Or is there something else that puts you in the zone and helps you stay focused?
I have to be listening to music while I'm working. I get very easily distracted, and I know that about myself. So listening to music while I'm working um, really helps me kind of tune out any of the outside distractions and keep me looking just at work. And yeah, absolutely. Whatever it is that I'm kind of feeling that day. Metal is definitely my personal favorite, my preference. Be it anything from Metallica to Lamb of God to Cannibal Corpse. Like it really kind of runs the gamut there. Gojira's Gojira's performance at the opening ceremony of the Olympics. Oh my God, that was amazing. And then I'll go the other end too, right? Where maybe I'm feeling a little bit more lighthearted. So I'll go with NoFX, The Dead Pets, love Blink 182, right? It spans. Kind of depends on my mood. But yeah, the metal is definitely where I lean into the most for sure.
I remember when we were in school, you were drinking how many Red Bulls a day were you drinking? You were drinking upwards of almost like 8 or 10 a day,
It
weren't
was
you?
too much. Yeah, I was keeping myself very amped up. Yeah, it was definitely too much.
It was insane.
Yeah, I've transitioned fully to coffee now, so
There you go. Yeah, you're always highly caffeinated, but
yeah. The worst part though is I can still go right to bed.
yeah,
So
I don't know how
doesn't
you do
doesn't
that.
do anything anymore.
I hardly drink any caffeine at all, and I still struggle with falling asleep. So even like after tonight's broadcast, I'll be up for several hours. But uh, your hockey interest, right?
Yeah.
So you're a goalie, you're a goalkeeper,
Yes, I am.
and you've been playing for a long time.
I have. I would say I've probably been playing for like the last 30 years or so because I still play to this day. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a great stress relief. Um, it's taught me a lot about myself and how to handle failure and making mistakes and being okay with it. Because anybody that's played really any sport, but especially like a goalie or goalkeeping type position, I think could understand where it's like it is very easy to beat yourself up when you get scored on. It's very easy to get deflated. But you have to keep that mindset of okay, well they got one by you. You still have to make the next save, and then you have to make the next one, and then you have to make the next one. And a lot of that kind of thinking has even carried through into my career, where I've made tons of mistakes. I absolutely don't get it right the first time, most of the time. And that's where, like, my whole mindset of, look, you got to get the bad ideas out of the way first. And the faster you can get through those, the better off you are, really comes from. It's just that idea of, all right, this didn't work. Let's do one more. Or you still got the next time to show it, whatever the it is.
At Mastercard, where you're at now, is the director of design operations. Do you manage a team now or hire people specifically for your team?
Yes, yes, and yes. So the team that I'm specifically a part, so my role is a bit of like in corporate speak, it's more of a horizontal role where I span across multiple teams and groups. My primary team is part of our company's innovation space. So we look at new products. We focus very early on in that generative research, creating what initial concepts are, prototyping those out, testing them, getting it to a point where we're even testing with potential customers in the market, down to the point where, hey, a decision's made of, is this a product we're going to continue to pursue or not? So with that, I look across a number of different projects and teams that I directly support. And then I also co-lead what we call our Customer Experience and Design Guild. And it's our organization agnostic way of bringing all designers and Mastercard together. Because we do not have one centralized design team. We have multiple teams spread out or distributed across the organization that support different verticals or different parts of the business. However, we're still one company. We're still one big group. Mastercard is a very well-known brand, one thing that's there. And it's important that we all are still able to work from the same standards. When you have multiple teams working, not necessarily together, but on the same type of work, it's very easy for those teams to become siloed. And you need to figure out, okay, how do we make sure Team A is not reinventing the wheel that Team B already did? Be it from a process perspective, a tooling perspective, a design asset perspective, et cetera. So the point I'm getting at is cover a lot of different spaces, work with a lot of different teams. With the Customer Experience Design Guild, myself and my colleague, her name's Adeline Berghauer. She is the other co-lead with me of the guild. And she's really been spearheading a great effort that we're calling our Bar Raisers initiative, which is really upping our hiring practices for designers. How do we make the interview experience better? How do we make it smoother? How do we make the onboarding process when somebody's extended an offer as easy and seamless and pleasant as it can possibly be? But also, how do we help teams that maybe have never, inside of the organization, that haven't hired a designer to their team before, understand what the right questions are to ask? What are the things that we should be looking for? What's the criteria we want to make sure that we put out there to find the right candidates and the right fits for the teams that we're hiring for? I would encourage anybody here, by all means, take a look at the job board. That's you can find it through LinkedIn or off of the Mastercard site for I think it's just careers.mastercard.us, and it'll redirect you to your appropriate local location. Take a look at some of the design roles. We've got a number that are open right now, especially in Dublin, London, Lisbon, Portugal, are some of the areas that we're actively hiring in right now, and a couple in the States. But then the other part to your question, sorry, do I have a team? Yes, I have a team. I have a team of 3 folks where we focus specifically on design operations, where we're looking very much at what is our process, how do we align to our overall corporate framework in terms of how we build product and how we create things, and how do we make the big effort that I'm working on right now with my team is looking at, okay, how do we better intake work? Right now, different teams are finding out about certain projects and initiatives at different times. It's not working. We're running into challenges when it comes to resourcing, prioritization, and there's internal politics that could be at play. It's just, stuff that doesn't have to be as challenging as it is. So we're working on a whole new model related to project intake to ensure that the design team, the development team, the product team, all of us learn about what the next project is at the same time, that we've all got the same starting point, and everyone's able to equally weigh in from a resourcing or timeline and roadmap perspective at the start of something, as opposed to, oh, Justin, turns out we could use some extra help. I know we're 9 months into this project. We'll see you next week. Come on in. Like that doesn't necessarily help. It doesn't have all the appropriate documentation and information that was necessary to get someone up to speed to start. So that's like one of the main things that my team's looking at right now.
When you were part of the product experience design team, can you talk about, and if you can't, this is, you could just pass on this, but can you talk about some of those more wild initiatives that never got off the ground there?
I can't really talk about some of those projects, just because.
I got it. No
Yeah,
problem.
there's certain rules and I want to be very mindful of those. But
No
what I can say is projects that typically don't get off the ground or that we aren't able to progress or move forward with. Sometimes it comes down to, hey, you know what? We actually weren't trying to address the right problem. Understanding what the problem is that you're actually trying to solve is massive. In my eyes, it is the most important thing, because if you don't have a clear understanding of the problem and the space or context in which that problem resides, you don't have then a good enough kind of like first step to build on or build from. Because if you're not solving a problem or addressing some kind of an unmet need, the likelihood of your product getting adopted or used drops significantly. And there's still a substantial investment to build something new. So if we're seeing from our data, our research, any kind of metrics that we're tracking, that it's not heading in the right direction, then yeah, we have to make a decision to say, okay, either we're going to continue, stop, or pivot this particular project. And there's been plenty that I've seen and that I've been a part of where we've pivoted. We've had to pivot and say, you know what? We're at a point where we've got a solution and we're searching for a problem that this solution solves. We've just wasted a lot of time. Got to figure out what the problem is first.
I just want to thank you again, Tim, for taking the time to join us tonight, for coming on to the show, discussing your career journey. And make sure you connect with Tim on LinkedIn. He has the handle iHeartRendering, which speaks to his motion graphics and video editing work from way back when. Ask him about it. You got some good stuff, my friend, and you're going good places. So keep up the good work.
Shucks, thanks. Right back at you, buddy.
And if you enjoyed this program, catch all the latest updates for the next Spotlight sessions and all the great content we have here in the Adobe Creative Career Discord by following the upcoming events calendar located at the top of the server so you can see what's coming next. I also want to thank my new producer, Catherine Chu, Lisa Temple, live moderator, Elizabeth, and the entire Adobe crew for sponsoring this program and helping to bring it alive. And thank you, Discord community, and to everyone who tuned in to listen to me, your host, Justin Bamforth. You can always catch me on Discord, LinkedIn, or on my website, justinbamforth.com. Until next time, everyone, take care.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Bye.
For more conversations with creative professionals, subscribe to the Spotlight Sessions podcast or check out the Adobe Creative Career Discord. Links are posted in the show notes.